Tape my eyes open to force reality. Why can't you just let me eat my weight in glee? Hush.
Welcome, World Ablaze listeners and now watchers. As promised, I am doing video episodes, and as I stated previously, for those who do listen to my audio-only episodes, I am primarily focusing on guest episodes and where those will be video because I just believe it's better to be able to see people's reactions for better context. You can see people's faces, etc. Welcome to episode 80. And on today's episode, I have guest Even Longin. Even Longin is a psychologist of 45 years. He used to have his private practice. He also taught psychotherapy, and he's a published author. He wrote the book, The Root of Evil. And in that book, he discusses how it is possible that evil can creep into society without us even knowing it. And of course, this discussion definitely goes in the direction of Trump. We discuss Trump as many consider him to be evil or Hitler or a dictator. And so that discussion is had. But then we shift from domestic politics and talk about conflicts abroad. We talk about Israel, Gaza, and of course, we discuss Russia and Ukraine. I really do hope you enjoy this episode. Evan's a very intelligent person, and this is a great episode to watch because in this episode, you see that two people that don't necessarily agree. I'm not a Democrat of the left, and Evan is definitely not of the right, but we were still able to come together, have a discussion, and even offer solutions that work. I mean, just make sense for everybody, for humans living on the planet in a way that we can coexist and respect each other. So without further ado, here is Even Longin. So thank you for taking the time and coming on to the show. And as we just discussed earlier, before I press record, appropriate given what's going on in California. Before we move on, I want to go ahead and, the background that I see here on you, you were a psychologist before with a private practice. Is this true?
Yes.
Okay. And you taught psychotherapy for over 45 years or so. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then you became an author, that book, The Root of Evil. And was that released in 2022 or 2023?
2020, at the end of 2022.
So right on that cusp of transitioning into 23?
Yes.
And you're known for that. You sold a few copies for sure, and you do discuss it. And the subjects in here, now I'm a politics and geopolitics show, but I do like to venture out into other areas. That being said, I think a lot of what you wrote and what you study is very appropriate to what's going on today. I did want to ask you, though, before we dive into that, excuse me while I turn this up, that you mentioned something I'm reading here, your bio, about how psychotherapy, I believe, if I'm getting this correct, can fail society or it can lead?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's how I got interested in this whole idea of the breakdown of institutions and the breakdown of the body politic, because in my own field, we failed people frequently.
Okay.
I originally was a fellow at the Nathan Ackerman Family Institute, where I studied a postdoc in family therapy. And one of the things we noted back then was that the person who's the identified patient may in fact be the person who is most likely to bring new perspective to the family.
Okay.
And over again in my career, I was given very difficult cases that were not responding to treatment. And I found that they weren't responding to treatment because they were treating the wrong person. That the person that was the hospitalized or identified patient was not the problem. And I have a case that I talk about in my book that's the simplest one to understand. I get a call from a mother who tells me that her doctor, her pediatrician, had referred her family to me, that her son had just been excluded from school after he went back to school and knocked out all the windows on the first floor of the school. This is an 8-year-old boy. So I said to the mother, well, okay, I'm more than happy to see you. I want to see you tomorrow with your whole family and with the boy, and we'll all talk about what's going on. And the first thing she says to me, no, 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 you don't get it. My son is the problem. We don't need to come in. And I said, well, you have to humor me because this is how I work. I like to see a family together, get a feel for what the dynamics are that are going on in the family. And if you want to bring your son in, I'm more than happy to see you. She said, well, I'm not coming in. I said, well, listen, then go back to your pediatrician and get a referral to someone else. She said, well, the doctor said you're the best around. I said, well, thank you. So if you want my help, come in. So the next day she arrives, her husband and herself and her son, but she didn't bring her daughter. And I said to her, where's your daughter? And she said, my daughter's not a problem. My son's the problem, and you got to fix him. Well, you see where this is going, obviously.
Absolutely. I do.
So they all come into the office, the three of them. And I say to the son, would you do me a favor? Take your chair and bring it up next to me. I want you to be my assistant therapist. And he goes, really? And I said, yeah, I'd like you to help me. And the mother goes, what is this? What are you doing? You're rewarding him for being a bad kid? I said, no, I'm getting him to participate and to feel safe and to join me in exploring what's going on in the family. Well, to make a long story short, ultimately, she's about to leave when the father says, I can't take it anymore. My wife was out cold on the floor when he came home from school. She's a drunk. She's out of control. And he, in his own way, went looking for help. I said, wow, that's really impressive, Dad. So I've seen so much of that. I've seen where it's so easy to look at a situation and blame that person. And so often, if that kid had been treated in a more traditional setting, he would have been in therapy forever with no progress.
All because the mother wanted to mask her own actions and her own behavior.
Yes.
Which was affecting the family unit and the child.
So those are the kinds of situations. That's as blatant one as I can share. We worked with a team. We would have a team of people who sat in the room with me, and the family would sit with other members of my team being interviewed. And then the family we would talk amongst ourselves about the things we heard. In this one instance, a young man who had been in McLean's Hospitals, a famous psychiatric facility, and had been removed because he wasn't making progress, sat with us on our team. And the mother and the father and the sister were talking on the other side of the room. And after they finished talking, he looked at us and he said, holy cow, is it possible that I did the things I did because I knew my mother was so depressed and I needed to do it to help the family? Is that possible? And this came spontaneously from this 12-year-old boy. So again, over and over and over, I have been called into difficult situations that don't get better because they're treating the wrong situation, the wrong problem.
Right. And that's common.
That's how I got into this.
Yeah, that's common in just the medical industry in general.
Yes.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So with that being said, is that is why you got into doing what you're doing, and why you chose to go down the path of researching, and you, in your book, you do give your opinions on how evil can easily sneak into society. Now, does this tie into that? Do you think?
Yeah. Again, what I started to see in situations in the families I worked with, and by the way, I also back around 2010, that era, for 5 years, I was in the Middle East working with Palestinian and Israeli children, bringing them together to talk with each other and to learn about each other and to collaborate. So my experience went from being a psychotherapist to working in issues in the community. But what I saw over and over again was one, binary thinking, us versus them. In the case of the Middle East, Israelis versus Palestinians. In today's California, the white majority versus minority immigrants. They're seen as different. They're seen as other. The second thing is power over behavior, where the psychiatrist or the teacher or the politician uses power to control situations that should come about in a more collaborative discussion between people. The third piece is the control of information. Today, a blatant thing happened. I don't know if you saw. Senator Padilla was tackled when he was trying to ask questions of the Secretary of Homeland Security.
I did not see that today yet. No.
He was thrown to the ground. He was handcuffed. And the story that MAGA is putting out is that they didn't know who he was. He didn't identify himself. Well, you can watch the TV reporting of this, and you can see he's going, I'm Senator Padilla. I mean, that is, they said, and they're throwing him to the ground. So again, there's a distortion of information. Information's corrupted. We don't get the truth.
Well, and
the final piece that I found was people come up with simplistic solutions to complex problems.
Yeah, they do. They oversimplify
right?
it.
So instead
Absolutely.
of they're saying, okay, this is going to require some thought. We're going to have to work together.
Right.
Both sides have to come together and collaborate to come up with a solution. Unfortunately, in all the instances that I put in my book of evil in the community, in the college, in psychotherapy, we come up with simplistic solutions. This kid broke the windows. He needs to be the patient. It's too often a simplistic approach to something that requires more in-depth discussion and collaboration.
Well, because punishment's not treating the cause, right? Or the root of why they behave that way. Right. So that all being said, it's in society. I mean, we'll just dive into, because we're already talking about things that are going on. Obviously, Trump administration, very polarizing figure. Some people approve, some people don't. But regardless of, some people see him as a dictator, fascist, evil person. Fine. So let's talk about how, or if you can explain rather, because you're the expert in this, from your viewpoint, how does evil creep in? How does it get accepted into society? And how do these cults get formed where people are just willingly, just blindly following the leader? How does this happen?
How does it happen? I just got back from Europe. I was in Germany, in Austria, and I was struck by what a wonderful culture, historic culture, the German, Austrian culture has been over generations. How was it possible that people joined with Adolf Hitler in this horrendous movement that was so inhuman, so evil, so dastardly? I don't know whether the word to use.
That is the prime example of evil sneaking in and becoming accepted.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And being accepted. My sense is you need people to be frightened. You need people to feel like they're not being heard. I didn't spend enough time in my book talking about that. The reason why Hitler took hold is the people of Germany felt like they were mistreated after World War I. They were poor. They were hungry. They wanted more opportunity, and Hitler was giving them a sense of power, a sense of being heard. Trump is doing exactly the same thing. Trump listened to people who were feeling left out, feeling like to people who felt like they weren't given the same opportunities as others. Unfortunately, those people are not being represented by Trump. He is not making it any easier for them to buy eggs. He's not making it any easier for them to have access. In fact, his whole political economic strategy is he's going to give more money to the rich. And then ultimately that's going to seep down to the poor people. Right. So again, they think he is speaking to their hurt and their anger, and they're receptive to it. That's how it happens, I think.
I mean, you got a point. I can't argue against that. That is usually how most any leader who gets elected, though, comes into power, regardless. I mean, you're trying to play to people's sympathies, right? Or that's usually what you do.
But the problem with Trump, with Hitler, with other megalomaniacs, is that they really don't offer solutions that will make the situation any better. They offer false solutions that ultimately create more problems. It's interesting.
Do you think some of because he is an interesting person to talk about. I mean, he's never had a president like this ever, and I will say that I don't agree with how he acts in public. Like, he's not presidential, and the thing that he does, like, why are we airing out grievances on social media, for example? That whole spat between him and Elon Musk and whoever wants to speak up against him, like that's kind of closed door conversation, right? You work that out. You keep that out of the public, in my opinion. Do you feel Trump, though, at times where he does have success, do you think it's intentional or just accidental? Like, things just kind of haphazardly come together and he just claims the win?
Look, unfortunately, in each of these situations that I think evil comes about, the person is not open to collaboration. The person is not open to being in a discussion that brings together multiple ideas and then work out as best a solution as you can. Trump, unfortunately, besides being vulgar and crass, doesn't respect. He speaks badly about anybody who disagrees with him. He calls them communists. He calls them weak. He calls them all kinds of names. But he doesn't say, okay, I want to talk with them. Let's sit down and talk about what's the best way to go forward. And that was my sense when I was in the Middle East. Those people never understood that both sides had reasonable claims to their position.
Okay.
It wasn't that the Israelis were correct or that the Palestinians were correct. They both had legitimate claims that needed to be listened to. And unfortunately, the powers that be continued to vilify the other side.
Right. Well, that's not uncommon, though. Each side thinks they're right. Each side thinks that they're owed whatever it is they believe is owed to them. That situation, like that goes back a very long ways. It really does. I don't know if we're ever going to come to a solution on as far as that goes. I would hope so. I mean, I don't think that the Palestinian people themselves need to be caught in the middle between what's allegedly happening between Hamas and, Israel. But it's just sad that I think that those people have to go through this, and they're the ones being stuck in the middle between the two fighting, and they're being used. They're being used, not just as shields, but as sympathy cards.
Being used.
Yeah, absolutely.
By both sides.
Yeah, they are.
So again, that's the problem. The problem is that's, to me, has all the makings of evil. Us versus them, power over behavior. I'm stronger than you, so I'll fuck you up.
Right.
Pardon English.
To put it blunt, yeah.
Simplistic solutions. I'll blow the hell out of Gaza, and Hamas will disappear.
Right, which is not the right
and not
solution,
tell the
though.
truth about the political realities that are governing why these people are behaving this way. The powers are behaving this way. Netanyahu has all kinds of political agenda that have nothing to do with Hamas, and yet that will be his calling card. I'm going to save the Israelis from Hamas.
So what do you think? So what is his actual political, example of his political agenda outside of he's going to save Israel from Hamas? What do you think it is he wants to achieve personally?
He wants to maintain power.
Well, yeah.
Right? He is in cahoots with the ultra-Orthodox, and he needs their support. He has been, much like Trump, he has been indicted on a number of crimes that he does not want to sit before the court. In fact, he's trying to change the nature of the court.
Right.
So those other agenda are part of what are driving him to do what he does.
Okay. And so how do you feel about the sudden thinning out or pulling out of, our embassies in the Middle East right now? Is it basically you think the US or Trump saying, hey, I had nothing to do with this. Netanyahu's doing whatever he's going to do. We can't stop him. We can't control him. He's not listening. The reports are there is a verge of, they're on the verge of attacking Iran, for example.
Yes.
Which is what the hot topic is, which is a bad thing, regardless.
Yes.
What do you think the move was there then, as far as Trump or his administration trying to pull out?
As far as Trump's concerned, Trump thought he had an easy solution to the situation in the Middle East. He thought he had an easy solution to the Russian-Ukraine war.
Right.
Neither one of those things are turning out to be easy solutions and require a lot more in-depth analysis and discussion than he understood. Now he sees that Netanyahu is as crazy as he is, and that Netanyahu can't be dealt with in a way that he anticipated Netanyahu would be. And it scares him to think that all of a sudden the Middle East is going to blow up into a major conflagration.
I mean, they were always on the verge since the beginning of time, it seems, as well. So let's talk about that Ukraine piece then. So does the world really seem, both the world blames the U.S. for that situation for whatever reason. Do you think that Trump is really the blame for this situation? And is it solely
blame for what situation? I mean, he certainly wasn't
in Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, I think the one to blame there is another egomaniac named Putin.
Right.
And Putin was determined to make a greater Soviet Union again.
Yeah.
And he's thought, he again misread simplistic solution to a complex problem. He misread the situation in the Ukraine, that they would be easy marks for him to march in and him take over a part of their territory. So again, it starts, I think, with Putin. Unfortunately, again, Trump being who he is and his sense that he has this charisma that can make other people bend to his ways, thought that Putin would come around and he would come up with an alliance and they would solve the Russian-Ukraine problem, just like he did with Netanyahu. Unfortunately, he's dealing with people who are much the same as he is. And then you got guys like Erdogan and Turkey and Orban and Hungary, all these people that he aligns himself with that are also of the same ilk.
So,
I mean, think about the simplistic solutions that he's coming up with while he's alienating NATO, our historic allies, making like they are robbing us. That's such misinformation. Again, it's so interesting. Have you been in Europe recently?
No, I have not.
Europe is so far ahead of us in their lifestyle. They have buses that don't give off emissions. They have lights when you go into the room to go on and off. They have escalators at the airport that shut down if there's nobody running on them. They have streets that are paved. We're becoming a third world country. He's telling everybody we're the greatest country in the world. My eyes tell me that you go to a place like Spain or France, they live so much healthier lifestyles. They take breaks in the middle of the day. They don't work the number of hours we work.
I've heard
they
that.
Get all these benefits that he calls the socialist conspiracy. They get their medicine paid for. They get their education paid for. They get their home schooling paid for their children. And we're talking about them like they're crazy people. We aren't getting the facts out there for us to listen to.
Yeah, but our situation has gone, this is years in the making. This isn't specific to any Republican or Democratic president regardless. I mean, this has been going on for quite some time.
No, but it's been taken to an extreme.
Well, it has, because people tend to not like Trump. And, so call it what you will, but when everybody is doing everything they can to focus the messaging on Trump bad, hate Trump, he's going to be the scapegoat of everything. Now, he's not perfect. I've already admitted that. And he does do some stupid things. I mean, we can't, I'm not going to sit here and pat him on the back all day, because I can't. We can't deny it. It's like I scratch my head constantly. Like, what are you doing? Sometimes I'm like, yes. Okay, you got something, but then you got a question. Well, was that accidental? Was it really planned? I have no idea. He's definitely going to be studied for years, I believe. Now, as far as Ukraine goes, let's talk about that, because that whole thing started way back. In fact, during the Obama administration, everybody turned their back when Russia took over Crimea and it was annexed. Nobody stepped in to help Ukraine at that point. Here we go, fast forward, Russia's trying to do it again because, as you said, Putin wants to reunite the old USSR. That's always been his goal. He's never hit it. He's said it many, many, many times. He's getting older. There's a legacy issue for him. He's getting older. He's been in power for a long time. I think it's now or never for him. Now, I call this a cold World War III, because reality is China is involved. They have troops there, although they're claiming they're not involved in the war. They have North Korean troops there, and Iran has been sending technology and drones and other things to support this war as well. Everybody else has done nothing. Let's just be quite honest. Europe hasn't done anything. Keir Starmer talks loud. Macron talks loud. Nobody does a thing. The United Kingdom signed a 100-year agreement with Ukraine way before the incident happened in the White House between Zelensky and Trump, by the way. Signed in January 2025, where they committed to build up their economic trade, okay, using, by the way, UK trade partners and trade channels. They were going to bolster their business, help them with their minerals, and protect them. A 100-year agreement that was signed January 2025. Nothing has happened. Nothing outside of maybe sending a little bit of money. Maybe they get a little bit of munitions. Even Keir Starmer said, hey, we're gonna go ahead and we're going to ramp everything up. We're going to put boots on the ground. Hasn't happened. Nobody's putting boots on the ground. It doesn't matter who it is. Yet the U.S. is blamed for the whole thing because we're seen as a superpower. What's stopping Europe? Poland is on the ready. Poland has been very, very much on the ready and protecting their border and ready to go. But the reality is nobody wants a nuclear war. Nobody wants to admit that. No one's really coming out and say that. That's the only reason they're letting Putin do what doing anything he does. Now, you take that into account, that China, anytime, they're saying they don't support this, but yet they're sending troops and then they're playing games over there in Taiwan. So This situation is bad regardless. If Europe steps in, China might say, cool, here's our opportunity. While everybody's focused over here and the U.S. might have to go and help their allies, they're going to move in on Taiwan, right? So while the U.S. gets the blame and Trump gets the blame, this thing was debacled. This was a mess since Obama. Nothing happened under the Biden administration either. Nobody wanted to step foot. Everybody talked loud. Nobody did anything. I personally think it's time to pull our heads out of our ass. Trump needs to go in and we need to do something because we also have an agreement with the Ukraine. Are we really going to be protecting them? Is the UK going to protect them? Or is everybody just going to posture and try to win brownie points, in the media by saying, hey, I'm speaking tough to Putin. Putin don't give a damn. Putin can care less. He's already called everybody's bluff. So what's the next step? We could point the finger at who's to blame, but who's going to step up?
I don't want to talk about who's to blame.
No, I know. I said, but everyone's doing that right now. So I'm saying, who's going to step up?
We need a solution.
Absolutely.
This goes back to the fall of the Russian Empire.
Yes.
We made some very tactical errors in closing in on Russia with NATO.
Yeah.
I think
I don't disagree with that, by the way. I think that was a bad move. It really was.
It was a bad move. And I think what we created going way back, so we're going back into the 20th century, that lots of errors have been made, a lot of simplistic solutions to complex problems.
True.
I'm not here to blame Trump for having caused this. What I do concern myself with is when he says things like the Ukraine attacked Russia, that those kinds of misinformation are problematic.
And I agree with you there. I do.
Right?
I think that's wrong.
And I'm agreeing with you too. I mean, it's very scary because if we back Russia into a position where they feel they have to strike out with nuclear weapons, we'll have a horrendous situation. So we don't want to do that. But it's very important, I think, for the United States to stand with its allies and say, we will confront this together, not to blame them, not to distort this as we have no problem with Russia. We do. The Russian situation is problematic for us and for them. And I keep coming back to this. The solutions are collaborative. The solutions are discussion. The solutions are looking at both sides of an issue. Russia needs protection. Russia needs to know that NATO is not going to infringe upon them.
Right.
Russia needs to know that they're going to have access to selling their goods again and building back their economy. There needs to be people coming together, collaborating in a sensible dialogue instead of us against them, whoever them is.
You're spot on there because everybody wants to be, everyone wants to take credit at this point, right? The UK wants to be the one to say, look at the solution I have. We're the hero. France, same thing. Obviously, Trump's doing the same thing. It's a really dire situation because the people that are suffering, the people in the Ukraine, period. Zelensky cannot win this war. He can't on his own. Like I said, everybody's sending munitions and money, but that's not going to win it. It's going to have to be numbers, bodies, boots, period. That's the only thing that's going to work. But people don't realize.
Again, I'm concerned if you start sending boots in, things escalate.
Exactly. That's the crux of it, right?
That's the crux. So again, you're very knowledgeable about this, George, but my sense is both sides have reasonable positions that need to be heard.
No, agreed. And I was going to echo what you said earlier.
Trump is a success in this last election because he heard the voices of people who were in pain. That the Democrats were talking about all kinds of, what's the word for it? Social issues like should transgender people play sports?
Right.
Rather than talk about the price of eggs, rather than talk about the fact that people are feeling cut off and they don't have access. Again, this country cannot operate without immigrants, even illegal immigrants.
Right.
What's happening in my own community? I was sitting in the diner the other day in Salem, Massachusetts, and the waitress said to me, you know what's happened? None of the Hispanic people come here anymore. They're all frightened. They're all frightened that they're going to get rounded up. There used to be all these workers at Home Depot who would line up there every morning to help contractors and landscapers and all kinds of. They don't come there anymore because they're afraid they're going to be targeted and arrested. We need these people. No, there aren't poor people who want to do what the day laborers do who are illegal immigrants. Our country will, you guys out in California will have no more avocados if you don't have those people.
Yeah. Well, our avocados were pretty much given away to Mexico as it was as far as an industry. It started in California, and now we import it all from Mexico. So there's that with avocados. I don't disagree with your statements. This is a tricky situation because I think that we need to enforce policies to protect our sovereignty and our borders, but we shouldn't be targeting everybody who looks like an illegal immigrant. You know, you have to do your research.
100%. That's right.
If
and he Trump said he was going to go after those people who were criminals.
Yes, that was what he said.
That's what he said. But he's not doing that. He's going into places like the Home Depot and rounding up everybody who's brown.
Yeah, they're casting too wide of a net on this. I mean, I believe you and I may be in agreement on this. They should just go after the people with the criminal records that are obviously not legal but have a criminal background. They need to be addressed, period. The way this law even works, so even if you have a green card, by the way, if you commit a crime, you are still eligible to be deported. You're not safe in that either until that you actually become a citizen. As far as you said with the legal workers that will do the work in the fields, we do need them. Now, at that point, though, if they did this legally, they're not illegal. They do get a visa in which they are allotted a certain amount of time to stay here and work under a legal status.
We are in total agreement.
Yeah.
There needs to be laws that are reasonable that can be enforced.
Absolutely.
And we can't just have porous borders where anybody can cross over and do that. Again, it requires people working together to sensibly work out and collaborate together to make regulations and rules that work and that are in the best interest of everyone.
Agreed. We need to do better, period. You know,
yes, we need to do better.
It wouldn't look so drastic if we didn't let it get to this point. The problem I'm having with the way Trump has handled this. Like I said, I agree with trying to clean up the mess, but he's taking a hammer and just hitting. It's like playing whack-a-mole on whatever, right? He's bringing down a hammer instead of using, you know, the term kid gloves. Like, you know, hey, let's be gentle about this. Let's try to approach this amicably. Because what gets me is this: when you have a family and you're just taking the mother away after being here for 10 to 25 years. And now, I'll just put this out there, and you might disagree with me. It doesn't matter how long you've been here. If you committed the crime of coming over illegally, it's going to catch up to you eventually. Just as if I robbed a bank, got away with it for 20 years, and all of a sudden the FBI finds out where I am and knocks on my door, that's serving justice. But in this case, with a family, do you think, and I think this, by the way, should you not take that situation differently? Should you not say, okay, look, there's a family here. She's already, this mother or this dad has children, been here for 10, 15 years, maybe negotiate to work out a program with them that they can take steps to make them legal or give them an extension. Say, all right, here's what's going on. We need you to do this, and we'll let you stay here for 6 months, for example, to get everything straight. How do you feel about that as a solution to those problems?
George, I'm impressed that you're a sensible man.
I try to be.
And that, of course, there has to be sensible mechanisms for evaluating a situation. You have a situation where you have a family where the children are, in fact, Americans.
Yeah.
They were born here, and the parents came in here illegally. We need to come up with ways of saying, okay, it's in the family's best interest and the community's best interest to give those people a mechanism for becoming citizens. It's much like we talked about Dreamers at one point,
right?
That they had mechanisms for becoming citizens. We can't do things with a hammer. We can't do things with broad us and they statements that anybody who was not born here has to be eliminated. We need to think about what are the effects on families, on the community, on industries? And that requires us all sitting down, people like you and me, talking about reasonable solutions.
Yeah. No, you're correct. I mean,
You're
absolutely
correct.
correct.
I'm with you.
I got my moments. Just put that. I'm never always correct. I mean, I never always get it right. Believe me. It's too hard. It's too hard to be, to have a definite answer to these things, as you said, because, there's a lot of gray area that's always ignored. It's not a black, it's nothing's black and white. Everybody lives in the gray. We got to admit that. Nobody looks at it that way. At least right now with everything going on. It's just black, white, done. No, there's a big gray area that everybody lives in. Period.
Yes.
It's not being addressed.
Again, that requires sensibility. I was going to say this before.
Sure.
There was a philosopher named Levi Strauss. Do you know of him?
I heard the name. I don't know the word.
He taught at the University of Chicago. He was a Holocaust victim in Germany. He escaped from Germany and taught philosophy at the University of Chicago. And many of his students were the neocons who worked in the Bush 1 or Bush 2 administration.
Okay.
And Strauss said, it's in the best interest of the community to lie to them if they can't understand the issues. Make up excuses such as weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
Make up those situations, and that will give you access to taking care of the people in the way that they should be taken care of. Unfortunately, I think Leo Strauss made a terrible error. Plato in the Republic many, many generations ago said that philosophers should be king. Unfortunately, nobody listens to them. They're the first ones to know there's a problem, but the last one to have any impact. So Strauss said, well, I'm not going to wait for Plato's solution to teach the people. We got to do it and protect people. Unfortunately, that's too often what is happening now in our country.
That's been the playbook, for a while.
Right? That's the playbook. Tell people what they can understand, even if it's not the truth, and come up with solutions that they can buy into. And that's not just one side or the other. That's not taking responsibility for saying, I don't have a solution that you'll buy into. Let's sit down, and I'm going to keep saying this. Let's come up with dialogue. Let's come up with consensus. Let's come up with mechanisms that bring people to listen to one another. You and I don't agree about everything, but we agree about enough that we can sit down and we can talk, and we can look for commonality that goes forward.
I think the opposition of opinion is how you come to a solution in the middle. I mean, if you can't hear each other out, you're never going to come up with a solution. You're just going to continue to be segregated, right, left, whatever. It's just ridiculous. If you can't sit down and talk about these issues, deal with your own emotions, angers, whatever it is, you have to be able to sit down, check that shit at the door, and just talk about the issues. Right. I'll ask you, Evan, what's your view on this? Great. I'll take it in. I'll give you mine. Same thing. And then in our minds, we're calculating, I don't agree with that, but he made a point here. And then we bring those back together and we say, all right, here's what we have. We got kind of an outline we can start with, and we just hash it out, right? That's the way it should be.
That's what I'm promulgating. That's my thesis. Let's sit down. Let's hear each other. Let's understand what you need, what I need. Let's come up with a solution. There was a time when Congress worked that way for various other reasons. I'll give you something for your farmers. You give me something for my industrial people. We'll barter solutions together. We don't do that anymore.
No, they don't. It's either this or nothing.
Yes.
Right? Especially how they pack everything with all this pork and try to sneak things in with these 5,000 pages they know nobody's going to read. Who has time for that? It's like, hey, we released this report. Here's Thursday. We're voting on it Friday. Who has time for that? Like this, it's ridiculous. and it's always a one-sided issue, always one-sided. And it's very ridiculous because it does leave a lot of people out, the needs of the actual people. That's what I'm getting tired of in America right now. I don't care who the president is, by the way. The reality is this country has not been looking out for its people. They've been playing on emotions. It's like you said earlier. I don't know if I'm correct on this, but it's kind of an example of what you were talking about earlier with Levi Strauss, for example, is that power over behavior, right? To me, I look at it from like a business owner, okay? The government is playing a psyop and they have an amazing marketing team and they know how to pull on your emotions, pull on your heartstrings to direct you where they want you to go. They're playing chess with us, basically. That's exactly what they're doing. We're the pawns.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we keep playing into their hand. They keep segregating us.
So, George, how did you get into this?
I don't know. Just kind of happened.
Just kind of happened. Well, I like your sensibility.
I started with my brother. So he's been a podcaster for probably 9 years now. And I started on his show a little bit here and there. And I've always been into politics, philosophy, everything. I'm not as educated as you in it, by the way. I can't just call people's names out in quotes, but I do like it. And I've been interested in politics for a very long time. Now, the reason I got into this is because I hear a lot of people talk. I hear these shows. I hear these talking heads that are just reading whatever script onto the teleprompter. And I hear a lot of these other podcasters, and I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. Or if they do make a point, I just got to a position in my life where I said, you know what? I have nothing to lose. Why don't I get on the mic and see if I can make a difference or at least vent or say what's off the top of my head? But I'll admit, I say some outlandish shit sometimes. Like I know that I'll say something and later on go, probably should kind of reel that one back a little because we do this in real time.
I like your sensibility. I hope that you get heard by lots of people because you're making sense.
I appreciate that. Thank you. But the problem with doing this, Evan, is we respond in real time, right? And I've said this before with other people, and I've had YouTubers, I've speak to people in the intel community, people in the military. Like I've had various guests and people I connect with since I've been doing this. And you're always right today, wrong tomorrow. You can't keep up with the news cycle. You can't keep up with what's happening, and we live in a world of sound bites and clips. We always get just a snippet of the actual information, right? Everything you see on social media, you never see the full video clip. You just see that one moment where they see the white guy being racist, for example, or the brown guy getting arrested. I'm not going to say whether those particular situations are right or wrong, but we don't get the whole context of what's happening. And people just eat it up. And they're conditioning us, just as you said. They're conditioning us with this. It's a tool that they're using.
I go back a long way. I was a medic during the Vietnam War. I decided when I got out of the Army, I was going to go to graduate school in psychology and do good. And some of the things that I worked on turned into such disasters. For example, I was part of a class action suit that took adolescents and children off adult psychiatric units so that they were being treated back in the 1960s and 70s amongst adult crazies. It was totally inappropriate. Then I was part of an action to close down mental hospitals. Well, we had a daily census in Massachusetts of between 30 and 50,000 patients in psychiatric hospitals, state hospitals, back in that era. You know where they are now?
No.
They're homeless.
Yeah, well,
there's the same number of people in Massachusetts who are on the streets.
I was, since you brought that up, I've had that opinion because I've known people who are in various organizations that would serve the homeless community.
Yes.
And I hate to say this, but the truth of the matter is exactly what you said. Most of these people have been abandoned by the state, the government. They're no longer getting funded. They're not getting their medication, not getting care, and they're left out in the cold to figure it out. They can't rejoin society because they're not they're not capable.
They're not capable of it.
Yeah, it's not that they're not smart, for example. It was just they lack those
sick.
social skills or whatever it is that will allow them to re-enter.
They're truly sick people.
Right.
And the fact is, we, in doing our do-gooding, closed the mental hospitals. Well, it's not by chance. That's the same number of people that today are on the street.
What? Okay, let's get back to that. What was behind closing that? What was behind closing the mental hospitals? Did they claim it was financial? Was it like what?
No,
was the
they
reason?
claimed that the people weren't being treated adequately. They weren't being treated humanely.
Really?
Well, again, in retrospect, they were being treated more humanely in a mental hospital than they are today on the street, sleeping in their feces. So again, we thought we were getting them to a place where they could be treated within the community and cared for by the community. The community didn't want them. So, we tried to set up halfway houses. Nobody wanted one in their neighborhood, not my neighborhood. I don't want to be part of the solution.
Because this is what you did. I don't, but from what I've read and what I've seen, documentaries and whatnot, not an expert, but the mental hospitals were definitely an issue when psychology was in its infant stages, when it was very experimental still. They're trying to figure that out, but it did get to a point where they got a handle on the abuse. But yet, even after that, it did get better, but they still decided this isn't good enough. Put these people out on the street. That's just crazy.
I've worked with Jaakko Sekala, for example, who's from Finland. And back in the Scandinavian countries, the community works together to treat the people in the community who are sick. They pitch in. They all have roles. They're small, homogeneous communities that care for their own. Our communities are too diverse. People don't care about what's happening down the street. It's unfortunate. Churches no longer. When I first started doing psychotherapy, I spoke at every church in my town. They all called me in to talk about how they can work together to do things in their own community. But people don't go to church anymore.
No. Let me ask you this. Why do you think people don't care, though, when it comes to the people on the streets and the homeless? Like, everyone...
It's not me. It's them.
Right.
It's us versus them. I'm not that problem.
Understood. I get that. But what caused that? I remember a time where people were more generous. And then I think it was sometime in the 90s, it just kind of flipped. Like all of a sudden people just stopped caring.
Yes.
They weren't giving them $1, for example, or buying people food. I'm going to say this because I've experienced this myself, and I know this from inside information with people who work in the missions and whatnot. There are literally people who gave up on society, not just sick, but they just don't want to deal with anything. And they find that living on the street suits them better. That's not the majority, by the way, but those people are there.
There's some. Yeah.
And I think that people stopped caring because they realized, with all the stories coming out and they themselves just being scammed. Like even in my town, we would see the same person pull the same scam over and over for 2-3 years, always pregnant, always just got dropped off at the bus. One year I recognized her and realized, hey, weren't you just saying this like last year? Yeah, you're still pregnant with the same baby. And I think those unfortunate circumstances or those unfortunate examples, by the way, is what led people to stop caring. They just feel like I'm not making a difference, and these people are just trying to take advantage of me. When
I went to school back in, I started college in 1964, and I went through to get my doctorate. Back then, all the smart people that I knew were going into professions like psychology or medicine, nursing, education, law. They all had a mission to make the community better. Sometime after the Vietnam War, sometime around the time of Ronald Reagan, the ethos changed to, I'm going to make money I'm going to be a successful business person. The smart people went to either business school or engineering.
Yeah.
And they no longer had a vested interest in making the community better. They came to the notion that they're going to make their own lives better. And I think that has persisted. I know with even my grandchildren, I'm saying to me, I have a grandson that graduated high school last week, and he's going to go to the business school at Boston College. And I said, why are you doing that? He said, what do you mean, why am I doing that? He said, I'm really smart. I'm going to be really successful. I'm going to make a lot of money.
Right.
I said, but you know what? You are so smart. You are so capable of making the world a better place. Why aren't you thinking in those terms? He said, come on, Granddad. Come on. Grandpa, you're talking like those hippies that you grew up with.
I don't. I mean, now that you say it, I mean, I do see that there's been less interest in professions that actually serve the community or even consider the humanitarian effort, right? And even the arts is on the decline, I believe.
Yeah, even the arts.
It's sad. And yes, the 80s was the age of business. You know, the power suit, the power tie, the whole deal. It was all about more money. You know, so when the stock market it was just crazy. Yeah, I think you're onto something there. You know, definitely it was a me first attitude that really started this.
Went from a community concern to me first.
Yeah,
Well
absolutely.
said.
It was a me first attitude. Let's get back to California a bit, and it's not just California. I mean, there's the big organized protests on June 14th, Trump's birthday or the Army's birthday, however you want to look at that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: what are your thoughts of what happened in California, though? I mean, we did discuss some of it already, but the infighting between the governor, you know, Newsom, Karen Bass, the lack of response. Again, this isn't me saying right versus left, Trump versus whatever. This is literally pointing out, I believe, the error in the lack of response to a situation. What do you think the reasoning was behind that, aside from political theater? Why did Karen Bass not respond with the police? And didn't have to be in a violent way, just to control, just have a presence. And why did Governor Newsom not respond either? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person to respond to that, but
sure you are.
The fact is, I thought they did respond.
Okay.
I thought that they were concerned that, and this is, I'm concerned about it in my own community. I'm joining an action committee to protect immigrants, that you can't have ICE come into your community and rip people out of their homes.
You're right.
Out of their jobs.
Yeah, we discussed. We agree with that. Yeah.
I think that it was a huge provocation on the part of the federal government to start mobilizing. We had a situation a couple of weeks ago in Nantucket where they rounded up 44 people who worked in hotels and restaurants in Nantucket and put them in a boat and took them away. They had no due process. So I think their first concern was that you can't go into a community and do this without people being offended, without people being put in danger. And my sense is that there has been a response on the part of California government. There was enough police that kept it contained. There was some bad apples, but they mostly contained to a small area the provocateurs. So I think Trump came in with his guys, escalating the crisis to something that was way beyond what really was called for. The National Guard, the Marines.
The Marines should never be deployed on U.S. soil against citizens, period. That's not what they do.
Of course.
It's not what they do.
And the same thing. What are the National Guard doing? 2,000 National Guardsmen are protecting the federal buildings. Come on, the police have to do this.
That's a bit much, honestly. But the lack of response I was referring to was, yes, the police were there, but they did not get deployed until Trump said he was going to send the National Guard.
I don't know that.
Yeah, and even Newsom refused to send in the National Guard. Now, I agree with you that I don't think there was a need for it. There's more than enough law enforcement out there to handle the situation. There really is.
Right.
Was a National Guard needed? I don't believe in this situation, but yet they were called in 1992 during the Rodney King riots. There were many examples of when the National Guard was called to control riots and protests that just got out of hand.
Yes.
The response of the National Guard being sent and taken over the president is a lawful order. And actually, if you go to the National Guard's website, it even says it right there. You can be called by any time by any governor and the president of the United States. So I'm just going to put that out there because that is fact. But was it needed? No. I don't think so.
No, again, I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm saying
I know you aren't. I know you aren't.
It was provocative today that the FBI threw Senator Padilla to the ground.
Yeah, I got to look at that. That's crazy.
It's all over the news today. And handcuffed him. That's not how you treat people. If you treat a United States senator that way, how is the little guy who works at the local
how are they going to feel? How are they going to feel?
How are they going to be treated?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't see it. I didn't see the reports yet. I don't know why I did. This wasn't on my radar. It's what I do. It's crazy. So what were the circumstances? Like, he was doing nothing other than, hey, I'm going to question you on what you're doing and what's happening.
Yes.
That was it?
Yeah. Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, was speaking and talking about how the Democrats failed society. Los Angeles would have been burnt down if it wasn't for their response. And he walked up and said, I want to ask you some questions. And they manhandled him. They threw him down.
That's not right.
It's not right.
That's not how you handle things.
Out of hand.
And that's the problem right now with the Trump administration at this moment. They had an opportunity to do the right thing. The actions like this does not work in their favor. This just supports what people are saying about him being authoritarian or even tyrannical. It's not a good look, period.
No.
I got to look at that. That is just crazy that they treated Padilla that way. And even in the Trump admin, like, my brother's very adamant. We're conservative, but even he always says on his show is like, I'm conservative, but I didn't vote for Trump. That's what he always says. He goes, I don't agree with how he handles himself. I don't think he's presidential, and I don't think he's presidential either. And the reality is, I like some of the stuff he does, but I mean, like I told you earlier, I scratched my head on a lot. It's like, hey, I don't think this is the way. I really don't.
Again, my sense is you need to see people as you see yourself.
Agreed.
I mean, that's the ultimate golden rule, right? Treat others as you would have them treat you.
Absolutely.
You need to have a view of the world that I'm not better or different than you are. We both have interests. We both have to take care of each other.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I was going to say something about the Trump administration in that the other thing that stood out is the fumbling of many things that were promised that haven't been delivered. We're still looking at Epstein files that are allegedly now. There's no video, there's no evidence, even though they have like a 10+ year investigation regarding Epstein. Suddenly, nothing exists, nothing's viable. We can't release anything. There's nothing there, which is ridiculous. Yeah. And then they give the binders to a bunch of social media influencers. What kind of move was that? There's a lot of stupidity, I think, that is not winning the people over. It really isn't. He has some people in his administration that should not be in the positions they're in. The one thing that was surprising to me is he does have some people that were from the Democrat Party that came over, but those people such as RFK Jr. and whatnot don't feel that they're part of that party anymore. But still, some of his administration, even he himself, by the way, is not necessarily a true conservative. I don't know
He's
where
not
he
at
sits.
all.
I don't even know where he sits.
I mean, where did he come up with this tariff idea? I mean, it comes from Navarro. Navarro is not a credible economist. And he hires Navarro to make this tariff policy for him. Where does he come off in picking Hexa as the Secretary of Defense?
Agreed.
These guys have no credibility.
I might argue with you in that. The whole tariff idea, I understand what he was trying to do. I'm not saying it was the right thing to do in modern times, okay? But, we were a tariff nation. This is fact. We did make our money on tariffs, but it was also a different world back then. It was not as interwoven as it is now.
Of course. I mean, you can't make an airplane with parts just from the United States.
Not going to happen.
It's a world economy.
Yes.
It's such a myopic response. Again,
Agreed.
simplistic.
I think Trump's approach was literally, it's a tit for tat, right? Hey, you're charging me 200%. We've done nothing about it. Well, hell, I'm going to charge you 200% now.
Yeah, well, look at some of the countries he did that with.
It's a zero-sum game, though, right?
Who sell vanilla, and
agreed.
Of course, they buy more than we buy from them.
Right? Stupid. But to me, it's a race to zero. Because it's meant the intention. I could read right through it. I understand the intention. Oh, this will get people to focus on domestic production, things made here in the USA. Yeah, but we're not set up for that yet. Like I said earlier, he uses a hammer without giving, a defined, guided step of how to get there. You can't just say we're going to turn it off now. I can see this being a 10-year plan, maybe even a 15-year plan, but it can't be a tomorrow plan, and it's just hurting everybody.
Yes.
In regards to what everybody says, look, inflation might be down. Yeah, exactly.
Simplistic solution to complex problems.
Agreed. And inflation may be down, but then the economy itself is not doing so good right now. It really isn't. Even in my industry, it's like it's almost like they just suck the air out of it. It feels almost like pandemic level business right now, back in the COVID times, for a lot of people in my industry and in a lot of industries. It's not
in my industry too. I mean,
you as well.
Again, medicine and psychology, the whole ancillary medical field is being run by large corporations that are making money at the expense of the people who need to benefit from these services.
Yeah,
we need to rethink things.
How is that
George,
allowed?
I got to go, unfortunately. Because I've enjoyed our talk.
I was just going to get into the insurance part of it, but that's fine. No, I appreciate your time. Tell everybody about your book, where they can get it, and how they can find you.
Yeah, it's on all the major outlets. Amazon, you can get on it. Most bookstores, you can order it through their catalogs. I hope people who liked what I've had to say and the ideas that I've expressed will go out and buy the book. I think it's particularly relevant to today's community.
No, it is. And I'd love to pick this up again because it sounds like you and I have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to talk with you more, George. I think you're being sensible. It's nice to see sensible people who are not being driven by some alternative philosophy.
I appreciate that. And same for you. I mean, it's all about what you said. We need to come to the table. We need to discuss these issues. And we need to live in reality. I mean, we need to be realistic about our approaches.
We need to live in reality, but we also need to listen.
Absolutely.
We need to listen to each other.
I agree. Absolutely. Thank you, Evan. And
thank you, George.
Again,
it was a pleasure.
I'm sure we'll talk again. All right.
Oh, good.
Okay, sir.
Bye.
All right. As usual, thanks for sticking around and either listening or watching or both. And please like, subscribe, and share the show. And as always, have a great day.
I wanna taste your content, hold your breath and feel the tension. Devils hide behind redemption. Honesty is a one-way gate to hell.